Midweek Monitor. I'm RiShawn Biddle. Here are the top 3 stories that you need to pay attention to in the world of education and school reform. First, on Capitol Hill today, Secretary of Education Arne Duncan is going to be testifying before the House Education and Workforce Committee. He will be discussing the 2013 budget proposed by President Obama, and of course there's also the competing budget that's coming out of the House Congressional Republicans, led by Paul Ryan, the House Budget Committee chairman. Now, of course, that budget proposal cuts $20 billion or more out of education spending. And so, of course, Arne Duncan has already decried that plan. At the same time, though, Duncan's going to face another challenge. This comes from House Education and the Workforce Committee Chairman John Kline, who has long opposed the Obama agenda on education and has opposed Race to the Top and other competitive grant programs. Instead, he has made that clear last week when he wrote to Appropriations Committee chairmen and members, telling them that he would support cutting funds for Race to the Top and school improvement grant programs, and at the same time would improve increasing spending on special ed programs. In fact, those special ed programs that have helped create education ghettos and have led to far too many young men going out of school, dropping out of school, and heading into prison and poverty. Well, it will be an interesting discussion to see what happens between Kline and Duncan. Meanwhile, at the same time in New York State, there's plenty of discussion about about teacher evaluations. This comes after the New York Post has published a series of names of teachers and names of teachers and their performance data that came out of the New York City database. Last week, Governor Cuomo and the state legislature came to an agreement on teacher evaluations. But now, it turns out, Sheldon Silver, the powerful Assembly Speaker, may be working together with Dean Skelos, the powerful Senate Majority Leader, to basically shut down any effort to publicize and release data on teacher performance. This will be very interesting because Governor Cuomo has made it clear, especially last night, that he will oppose any effort to restrict access to that data, and believes that California, there's going to be plenty of action there, largely surrounding school funding. Governor Jerry Brown yesterday won an approval from a state court judge to cut funding for the state school system. As you know, California is largely responsible for the funding of its schools, funding it from the state level instead of just simply local property tax dollars, thanks in part to Prop 13 and another proposition that was passed in the 1980s that requires a certain percentage of state budgets to be spent on education. Meanwhile, Brown is pushing to cut spending and is getting pushback from various constituencies. He's also trying to raise dollars. In fact, he's trying to put a referendum on the ballot that would allow for an increase in taxes in order to fund California schools. Well, there is, of course, some thought that says, well, California needs that money. After all, if you look based on the sheer numbers, per pupil numbers, California spends less per student than many other states. But at the same time, when one looks at how wasteful the spending is in California, the reality is that what we need to do is actually reform how dollars are spent. This starts with overhauling pensions. After all, California's teacher pension program is heavily underfunded. In fact, to the point that the pension deficit is so large that it's among the largest in the nation. And right now, fixing those issues, along with revamping teacher evaluations, this includes actually committing to building out the teacher data system that Brown had decided to shut down a few years ago. Well, it's going to be an interesting discussion there, and I'm going to tell you, it's going to be interesting to watch. Now, read Dropout Nation every day for your news and commentary on the reform of American public education. Listen to this week's Dropout Nation podcast on Trayvon Martin and how his death relates to what has happened in American public education, that we sacrifice so many young men the way George Zimmerman had murdered Trayvon. I know some people will not like it, but guess what? It's the reality, and we have to talk about it. And also listen to all the other Dropout Nation podcasts. This is Dropout Nation. I'm RiShawn Biddle. You have a great